PTSD is a human condition. It's not something a doctor can tell you, you're going to get better on this date and you'll be fine. The most important thing you can do is just to resolve everything up until that trigger.
What's going on, guys? Time for another episode of Behind the Uniform. Super hot day, so if we start glistening and glowing, our AC died. I'm sorry. Tell everyone who you are.
I am Jackie Person.
So if you've never seen the show before, the way that we roll is this. We invite active or retired emergency responders and veterans here to the Whiskey Wall. Sometimes we go out to them. They share some stories with you. They talk about a good day. They talk about a lousy day. They talk about challenges that they faced. Here at the Whiskey Wall, we always keep a bottle of whiskey and an empty glass as a tribute to the men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice and will never be able to share their stories with you. So you've got quite the background. You've served our country. Tell everyone a little bit more about you.
Well, I grew up in Foxborough, Massachusetts.
Patriots fan?
Yes.
I'm sorry about that. Continue.
Yes, I do like Tom Brady. I grew up in Foxborough. I joined the Army when I was 19 years old. I did a short stint in Germany as an MP. Mm-hmm. And when I came home with a baby. So I lived with my parents. Law enforcement was basically all I was ever interested in. So I took the civil service exam and I became a police officer with the town of Foxborough.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So first, thanks for being willing to make the sacrifices that so few Americans are willing to make.
Well, thank you for having me.
Of course. Where do you want to start? You want to start about sort of how you got to where we are today, maybe?
Yeah, that would be a good thing to start with.
All right. So you had an experience that is sort of the something that we pray that no officer ever has to experience. Why don't we start there? Okay.
So I'll start with the day that it happened. My day was just a very regular day. It was about, 8 o'clock, and I had laid on the couch and I don't want to go back to work. I had been coming off my days off. It was the first night of my rotation. I went into work and regular roll call. There was 2 people on and a sergeant on. We divided the town into north and south sector. I was given the south. My line mate was the north. And just about, I think it was a little after midnight, we got a call for a really bad accident up in the north sector. So my partner went up there, and about 1 o'clock, I received a call from my dispatcher that there was a drunk individual in his home requesting help. So I'm driving down the road. I'd given my location, because the call was not in my sector, so it was going to take me a few minutes to get there. So I do a U-turn where I am. I come to the Rotary in town, and I get a radio dispatch again saying that the caller had mentioned a firearm. So I stopped my cruiser. I sent him an MDT message, which is the computer message, and I asked him that I wanted in-house records, meaning does he have a license to carry, any previous arrests, any, known stuff about this individual. Then I proceeded to the call. When I got down to Beach Street, where the event happened, I was dispatched to 158 Beach Street, and I turned into 158R. And when I noticed that I was in the wrong driveway, I got another dispatch call saying that I was in the wrong driveway. So I did the U-turn. I pulled into the driveway, and as I have my spotlight on the front door, the side. It was a duplex, and it was the left side of the duplex. And I had pulled in the driveway. There was 2 cars in the driveway. I had pulled pulled behind one of the cars, and watching the door, the windows, the front of the house. I undid my seatbelt. I reached over to grab my flashlight with my left hand, which I never did. I was poor at tactics. Once in a while, I would, this is my shooting hand. You're supposed to keep your shooting hand free, but for some reason I reached over, grabbed my flashlight. I opened my my cruiser door, and I had one foot out, and I heard this strange noise coming at me. It was like a gurgling, growling noise. And when I looked up, there was a man in what I call a combat stance. I recognize that from my military training. He was coming at me, and he had a knife in his hand. And it wasn't like a little Swiss Army knife. It was the butcher knife from the block, the butcher block. You know, it was like the longest knife, like a fillet knife, I guess is what you would call it. But while I am processing all of this, I proceed out of my cruiser on foot, running backwards, screaming, yelling, drop the knife, get back. I remember reaching down and pulling my pepper spray out. And something in the back of my head just said, oh, no, not pepper spray. And I remember putting the pepper spray back. And when I got across the street, I hit the curb. And it felt like I was boxed in. It felt like I was in like a corner, like I had nowhere to go. And at that moment, I had given him the command. I said, I have a gun and I will shoot you. And he kept advancing forward to me. So I pulled my gun out. I placed it on my hip because I'm standing there with my flashlight. I placed it on my hip. And as he kept advancing towards me, I fired off a round. And when the round went off, it was so surreal and everything was so slow. I remember seeing the smoke at the end of my gun, or the powder. Everything was slow motion. Like, when you see in The Matrix, that movie, how they slow the bullet down, that's what it looked like to me. And he went down and he hit the pavement so hard that he came back up and went down again. And then a pool of blood just started. I reassessed the situation. I did my scanning and then I reholstered. At that time, a car had come up the street and I'm screaming at the car, get the fuck out of here, go back where you came from, because it was a crime scene. I'm hearing a window behind me, the house behind me, because we're in a very like a neighborhood.
Sure.
It's a busy street, but it's a neighborhood. There's houses everywhere. So I hear the window behind me. Hey, what's going on down there? I'm like, Foxborough Police, stay in your house. I get on the radio and I just call for an ambulance. And that's all I did. I said, I need an ambulance down here now. I didn't say shots fired because when the press gets a hold of that, they come a-knocking. So at that time, my backup was on the way. And when my backup showed up, I had to, get in the street, and because the guy was in the middle of the road. Well, he was on the other side of the road, but he was in the road. And my acting sergeant got out of the car and grabbed me by my shoulders and said, "What did you do?" Yeah. What? So I said, I shot him. He came at me with a knife and I shot him. And the sergeant told me to go away, go sit down, take a breather, kind of thing. And I did. And my line mate actually showed up probably a minute after that and came over to me and he placed his hand on my shoulder and he said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm here." And he goes, "You did the right thing." And so long story short, nobody had any clue what to do with me. My partner had taken my gun and gave me his, which is pretty much protocol. You have to take the gun and bag it for evidence. We had another police officer show up, the acting chief at the time. He just came to the scene and gave me a hug, and because that's what I needed at the time. My husband at the time was a state trooper, and he had called his unit, said, "My wife's been involved in a shooting. What do you have for services?" My department had no idea what to do with me, so they transported me to the hospital, which was really a good thing because I ended up with a pretty severe injury to my ankle. But anyways, As the story goes, all over the news the next day for, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, and then it was done because I was justified that morning. My shooting had been justified by the DA. So there wasn't much controversy. There was no need for the news to keep talking about it. So after my shooting, I don't know what it was. It was, I don't know, it was later on in the morning. I got home about 6 from the hospital. Now, the incident happened at about 1, so I think I got to the hospital by 2:30 or so, stayed the night in the hospital, went home about 6, and a union rep and a lawyer came asking questions, gave them the answers, and then from 6 in the morning on, just people and calls and flowers and just the overwhelming support was phenomenal, which I don't ever forget to this day. I know exactly who called because I have a list of paper. Just massive amounts of support. And it was about 11, and I had received a call from my chief of police. He was down, I believe, in D.C. for a chief's conference. And the scope of the conversation was, "Are you okay?" And I was okay. I was alive. And he left me with this message: "If you need anything, call my wife." Call my wife, who is not a police officer, because I'm not there. Now, there hadn't been a shooting in my town in 70 plus years.
Wow.
So it was upsetting for the community.
Sure.
No one on my department had ever experienced anything as unique as this. And thirdly, I was the only female police officer on my department, which doesn't make me any different, but I really had no one to tell me, this is what you need to do.
Right,
this is what we're going to do to help you.
How long ago was this now?
Oh gosh, it was so long ago, 14 years ago.
Okay.
I just had my 14th anniversary in June. It was June 23rd, 2004.
So there really wasn't a process in place at that point.
No, and you know, to be honest with you, I don't even know, even if there was a procedure in our rules and procedures. I'm sure there was something probably in case.
Right.
You know, everybody has to have something, but
in case of an emergency.
I don't remember exactly what the policy said. But anyways, that's another issue that I'll discuss. So I just went through my day. It was so surreal. It was just, there was no, it was all up and down emotions. I was either extremely elated to be alive, or I was extremely sad because I took a life.
Right.
And I hadn't really processed everything that had happened. It took me about 2 weeks to even accept the fact that that happened. I didn't want to leave my house. I wasn't eating. I wasn't sleeping. Just who I was at that time was not who I was before. I changed in an instant. And I recognize now that it was because I knew what real danger was. I knew what that fight or flight is. I knew what it was to take a life. I knew what losing a life felt like, or the threat of losing your life felt like. And it was very, very surreal. So long story short, I ended up getting a debriefing about two months after my incident. Thankfully, my husband at the time had the resources through the state police. They hooked me up with this debriefing place that works solely with emergency service personnel, corrections, police officers, EMS, even spouses. It's called the On-Site Academy. And they're a small network, nonprofit, just want to do good for people who need help.
Awesome.
And I ended up going for a week-long debriefing with 2 Boston police officers that were involved in a shooting the same week that I was. And I felt like $1 million.
Sure.
I felt like $1 million after I had dumped just everything that I had held in, just all those
doubt.
feelings that are associated with that. So I went back to work for 2 months. I had asked my chief if I could work the day shift because I was still sleeping with the light on. And he said, sure, we'll just play it like ear. Every week I went into work. When are you going back to midnights? And I said, can you just help me along here? Let me transition. I wasn't really asking for a lot. I needed that support to help me through the fear is basically what it was. I had become a complete cowboy, as you would say, on the job. I was constantly looking for an adrenaline rush. I was constantly looking to get into a scuffle, anything that I could feel that high, because I was so low in my head and in my heart. It was about 7 or 8 weeks after I went back to work, where I went into my chief and I just said, I'm not coming back to work tomorrow. And he said, oh, you get a cold, you're sick. And I said, no, I'm not right. My head is not right. I'm not good. This is not good for me. It's not good for my family. And it is certainly not good for this community.
Right.
And he said, okay, take all the time you need. I had begun seeing a therapist, and I had gotten another debriefing. And in that debriefing, one of the things that I learned about myself was that my shooting had triggered some baggage that I had carried up until that moment. I had suffered a rape in the Army. So I had carried that all those years. It wasn't a very violent rape. It was very quiet, but it was still an assault. And I had been involved in a violent relationship with my husband. And combining all of that stuff, I was a mom. I was still trying to, be a mom to my kids. I was still trying to be a good wife while being abused, recognizing the sexual assault while I was in the military. Everything just kind of came to a head. And the shooting was what really triggered all of those unresolved emotions. So I had started seeing a therapist once a week and just unloaded. He didn't tell me how to do anything. He just sat there and listened. He just let me talk. And I can do a lot of talking. I can talk a lot. So going through therapy, I started to resolve some of the baggage, recognizing some of the behaviors that I needed to change. I had accepted some responsibility for things, which really helped me process all the stuff that went along with the shooting. After the shooting, I had the regular PTSD symptoms, nightmares. I was afraid of the dark. I had, the nightmare of your gun not working. I would literally have this repeated dream. I would be on someone's back deck. I would be at a call and I'd be on someone's back deck and I'd go to shoot my gun and the barrel of my gun would just melt. It just wouldn't work. Something weird in your brain happens when you have all this stuff, because everything is so in the front of your brain. Your brain has no time to rest.
Right.
So you're trying to process all this stuff. And like I said, I wasn't just processing the shooting. I was processing all the shit that I had carried up until the shooting itself. And when I started addressing the baggage that I had carried, everything along, all the feelings that I had felt because of the shooting, I started to feel better and more confident and, not insecure anymore, more secure in the incident in itself. The hardest emotion that I had to deal with was guilt and resentment. The guilt is there daily, not because I think I made a mistake, but because I still recognize that I took a life.
Sure.
I did the right thing because it was me or him.
Yeah.
And just because I saved my own life doesn't mean it's any less valuable.
Of course.
It's taken me a long time to recognize that. And the resentment I had for my department. And I think within the last 2 years, I've really learned to accept the fact that when I self-reflect about a lot of this stuff, I recognize that even though my chief said, call my wife, I know his intentions were good. He just didn't know what to do.
Right.
It was his first time too. Everything that I resolved was because of my own initiative. My parents always told me, your persistence as a child is always going to pay off as an adult. I was very stubborn. I was a very difficult child, but it has paid off as an adult.
So what are you doing with all of this now? Because
Okay.
I know you're very dedicated to helping others.
Yeah, so recognizing all the things that I had to go through, recognizing that it wasn't an easy fight per se. I have talked to a ton of people. Just talking about your incident in itself gets people talking to you. And I'm actually working with an organization. It's called VIPO. It's an organization started by 2 officers in Massachusetts, Mario Oliveira and Bob DiNapoli. They were both officers who were shot in the line of duty, and their mission is to educate leaders, educate the public, educate police officers, and to educate the people in the legislation that there are so many police officers that die in the line of duty, and we forget the ones that survive.
No doubt.
I've heard many, many times, I wish I just died, it would be a lot easier. And that just hurts my heart. It hurts my heart because when you're struggling in those emotions, you don't realize what's down the road when you conquer all that stuff. It is a fight. It's an internal fight. But when you keep hope, that's what helps keep the battling up. You just keep moving forward, and everything's a process.
Well, and you're right. We've heard that time and time again. We were filming with Pete and the crew over at the Wounded Officers Initiative. Number of wounded officers said it would have been easier if I died, because the financials alone of it are their family would have received some kind of payout, and in a lot of cases, their healthcare and their treatment isn't fully covered like you would just assume and expect. We heard the same thing out in Texas at the Not All Heroes Wear Capes event time and time again. So there's got to be something that can be done at that legislative level to help provide some more support, because their lives are so valuable.
Yes. I think that my feeling is sometimes you don't really understand something unless it personally impacts you. The reason why I'm so vocal is I never felt that I would have been better off dead. I mean, I've been in my darkest hole. I've been vocal about that. Because I was suffering. I didn't want to die. I just wanted to stop feeling the shit I was feeling.
Yeah.
And when you're not having leadership that is taking initiative to tell you, you need to do this. This is going to help you. Debriefings. First thing you do after a traumatic event for everyone involved. I wasn't the only one impacted by my incident. My whole family was impacted.
Of course.
The people that I worked with, my partner. My partner actually sent me a message on my anniversary and said, thank you for doing what you did, because I don't know what would have happened. Maybe I'd be dead. And I had never looked at it through his point of view.
Sure.
So hearing that, you realize that it's not just about you. It's a bigger...
It's a butterfly effect.
Yes, it's a bigger entity. The community was affected by that. You don't want to hear about that. And
Of course.
and the victim's family, the guy who wanted to kill me, his whole family, his mother lost a son, his son lost a dad. It's the trickle effect. Yep. And when you're not providing the services for people to at least acknowledge their pain, they're never going to make it.
Totally.
They won't make it. And What VIPO is trying to do is, and this is something that I've experienced personally, I was treated very well by my county, the retirement board. I was given an option. I asked if I could retire. And they said they had to look into it, and I was able to retire with 72%. Now, herein lies the problem. I'm 14 years post-incident. I've been home with kids, being a mom to kids. Divorced now, and I still need the ability to work.
Of course.
I can go back to work. I can't go back to the work that I was, and all I know is law enforcement.
Right.
But I need to work. This is where the injustice is. You cap a person's income. That's not American.
Right.
That is not American. That's
socialist.
That's a punishment.
Yeah.
You survived, but you can only do this. Now, I'm not complaining about my benefits. My benefits are awesome. I mean, they're shitty benefits because I was a patrolman. You know, it's not enough to raise my family.
Right.
But now I'm being punished because I can't bring in as much money as I want. I feel like I should contribute. I feel like I can give. I want to. I want to go out and bust my ass and make money and pay taxes.
Yeah.
I want to do that. But there's a law that prohibits that. And that is where the injustice is. We have so many police officers that when they get beyond this PTSD, they want to contribute. They want to work. They want to be better. But we're told you can't. And that's an injustice.
Absolutely.
Totally an injustice.
How can people help?
Well, my friends at VIPO are, they've spoken nationally. They're speaking to chiefs across the nation, chiefs of police, leaders in policing. The most important thing anyone can do is to recognize that PTSD, you can be diagnosed with it, but the prognosis is up to you.
Right.
You can be diagnosed with PTSD, but only you can decide if you manage it or not.
Totally.
You decide if you're better or not. And I've often told people, we get diagnosed with PTSD and it falls under mental health. It's not a mental health condition. It's a human condition.
Sure.
We all suffer trauma. We all, whether it's losing a pet, losing a leg, losing a family member, we all feel emotion. And if you don't feel that emotion, well, then you maybe have some emotional problems or mental health problems. But PTSD is a human condition.
No doubt.
It's a human condition. It's not something a doctor can tell you, you're going to get better on this date and you'll be fine. It's a constant work in progress. And the most important thing you can do is just to resolve everything up until that trigger.
We'll get the guys from VIPO in here. We'll be happy to give them a seat at the whiskey wall. And, I mean, maybe they could do us a favor and bring, like, Rosie O'Donnell and Justin Bieber up to Canada, drop them off, leave them there. They're already doing so much good work. What's one more thing, right?
Yeah.
Any shameless plugs you want to drop?
Wounded Officers Initiative was the very first organization that recognized what I did as a police officer, which I will always hold near and dear to my heart. I'm actually connected. I don't know if you know Randy Sutton.
Yep.
Him and I just made a connection over the weekend.
Awesome.
From someone else that I am friendly with.
Yep.
His name is Eddie Richardson. He's doing great stuff down in D.C. for legislation.
Awesome.
So hopefully.
And Randy's organization is?
Wounded Blue.
Check that out, guys.
Wounded Blue.
He's sort of my neighbor. So.
Yeah, Randy is?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Guys, it's going to take you 2 seconds to hit the share button on this video. Literally 2 seconds. Doesn't cost you a dime. Can help save lives. So thank you all for being a part of this movement. Thank you for watching. Thanks for sharing. God bless America.